Awesome. So, for our viewers watching after the fact, welcome to our 2030-ish book club discussion with the author of this month's title, which was Something is Killing the Children. And we welcome James Tynion IV. Did I say that right?
You got very close.
Okay.
It's
Well,
just Tynan, but it's not spelled that way. So I don't I do not
listen, that's all
yeah.
right. That's all right. So, welcome. Um, as you might have guessed by the name of this book club, we are all in our 20s or 30s, although I think this is mainly the 30s book club. I don't know. Oh, we might still have some 20s. We used to have some really young 20s, but now we're kind of getting older. That's okay. Um, so we'll go ahead and get started with some questions that we've prepared. So for our first one, this book club, we read a variety of books throughout the year. We don't really have a topic other than what do we feel like reading next month. We do try and read a lot of comics, but they're not our regular pick, and not everyone here is a regular comics reader too. So how would you describe Something is Killing the Children to entice a non-comics reader to pick it up?
Oh boy. Um, well, I mean, I'll say that part of what I'm trying to get at with the series is I wanted to do something that uh, felt like reading a Stephen King novel. Something that was paced a little like a slowly and deliberately, that lived in the character moments and didn't rocket ahead on the plot so quickly that you didn't have time to grasp what it is. And that and that comes from like I love the fact that every Stephen King novel, like the first 100 pages, it's just like they're typically like a nice family drama before everything goes crazy. Maybe there's one little like a horror sequence up front. So I wanted to do something that felt very grounded and very real, and then I wanted to create a character in Erica Slaughter, who would come into that world and feel like it's almost like a character more out of more standard, almost superhero comic in a way, walking into a Stephen King novel, and creating a kind of like giving a horror story a hero character who is there to help, but a hero character that kind of carries a bit of the what I kind of call a millennial spirit, which taps into the 20s 30s club here. But there, because I think there's a kind of exhaustion to being a millennial. I think that there's a sense that all of the systems that our world is built on are broken or not working that well. And anything good that we want to do, we kind of have to do ourselves. And we kind of have to push ahead, even though the systems that are in place are actively working against us. And so here you have you have a small town where every children are dying, and no one understands why children are dying, and the local authorities have no means of actually dealing with that or coping with that. And then here is a person who's going to come in to try to deal with this, and she is a part of an organization that has stopped caring about protecting people, but she still cares. So she's kind of working in despite the organization she's a part of. So all of that kind of comes together into that kind of like the exhaustion of Erica, and that was there from the beginning. It's like from the first character description before my amazing collaborator Werther designed her. It was always about the deep shadows under her eyes. Like that was very much at her core. And yeah, so that's sort of like like I feel like I answered that question in like five different directions, but only a little bit in each of them. But hopefully that gives a bit of a taste for someone who might not like. I don't think it's because it's a slowly paced comic. It's not like hopefully it's a book that kind of eases you in, so it won't feel like sometimes you pick up a comic and there are 20 things happening in the first few pages, and I love those comics, but I know that those can be alienating for some people, and that this is a book that, you know, like what is happening happens in a linear fashion and in pretty direct terms. So I hope you give it a shot, and I hope you like it.
I think they answered it perfectly. I think that's going to really, hopefully, and everyone here has already read it, so you didn't have to convince any of us. But hopefully, people watching later will definitely give it a chance and pick it up. So the next question we have is, what inspired you to write Something is Killing the Children? And I know you kind of touched on this in the question you just answered, but if there's anything else as far as your inspiration for the story.
Well, a lot of the work I do right now is, and I have been doing for the last decade, is I write a lot of superhero comics, and I've done a lot of work at DC Comics. And to be honest, one of the biggest things that drove me to Something is Killing the Children is I had been writing all of this very cosmic, very like magic driven stuff in a very like ungrounded world. And I wanted to tell a story that was set in a grounded world. I remember when I started writing the second issue, and I got really excited that I had a scene that's basically in a Denny's. And it was like, it was the weirdest. Like, I don't know why that thrilled me so much, but it was just the idea that it's like, I do not have to establish like the rules of this world in any way, which also allows me to kind of strip out one of the things that can be my least favorite part about writing superhero comics, which is like so much exposition of like who the characters are and who are the different organizations and what's the mythology and all of this. I wanted the world to be the real world, and I wanted Erica's backstory to be more of a, you know, something that was drawn out much more slowly. Uh, so that all kind of tapped into it. But the other thing I'll say, and this is something I've talked a bit about in other interviews of the book, is Something is Killing the Children is different from a lot of the things I've written because my original conception for the series is very different than the book that you all read. The what I originally pictured it as five standalone one shots, which was Erica like showing up in a town, the town not really understanding what was happening. She would take care of the monster, and then she would go on to the next town. And it was about these like telling little human stories that Erica would sometimes almost feel like this ghost-like character that no one in that town really like would ever fully understand. But once I started writing the first issue, I knew that it was not that I needed to stay with these characters, and I needed to build on this. And honestly, it was around the third issue that I realized this is not a 5-issue series either. This is a much bigger mythology and a much bigger world, and it really kind of built out from there. And yeah.
That's awesome. Um, what were the works that influenced you on this? So I know you touched a little bit on Stephen King, but was there any other particular work that influenced you on this project?
Well, specifically with Stephen King, I'll point to the It and Pet Cemetery, which I think are two of Stephen King's absolute scariest works. And I think part of why they're his scariest works is that they are the most human, and they also center children as characters. And there's something about like children in peril that cuts right to like a fear center, I think, in all of our brains, and it's a more raw fear center there. And it's something that, you know, reading those books for the first time, and I've gone back to them over and over and over, they always hit me like it's the first time. And so that is a key part of the the DNA of the book. Beyond that, I think the other books that really shaped how I wanted to build the series is, and this goes back to how I originally conceived the series, is I grew up on the books that DC Comics was putting out through its Vertigo imprint. Uh, in the 90s and early 2000s. And those books, like, they are what opened up what comic books could be to me. Like, they were the books that, like, introduced me to much, like, bigger and deeper ideas, and push the limits in terms of, like, how scary they could be and how human they could be. And it was story, like, it was honestly, when I was building the book, I saw it as something, like a Hellblazer, like John Constantine Hellblazer, where you would have, like, I wanted to create this singular character, this iconic character, and then sort of have a character who you could drop into almost any situation, and tell a variety of different stories with. And then, of course, I decided to just expand that first story to be one big 15-issue story. And it's honestly, now I'm starting to actually get into, like, what happens when you throw Erica into another type of story. But that was where the idea came from. Because the other thing I'll say is, I think in terms of comics, in particular, like creator-owned comics, books that don't feature superheroes, I think a lot of times, and this is something I've been telling my friends and all of that, I've been beating this drum for a while, is I think people forget to put, like, visually iconic characters at the center of a comic book. Like, I think, and comics are a visual medium, and you want to have the character that you want to draw in the margins of your notebook. Like, that you want that kind of, uh you want a character that lives with you outside of the book. And so really, that was the goal with Erica. And and I think we are starting to see now in comics, more people are trying to create characters, and build stories around characters. And I think we need new characters, because I think every generation has its own issues and its own belief systems and its own experiences. And sometimes, like, there's like, as the writer of Batman, I can say there's a lot of stories you can tell through the lens of Batman. But sometimes you need to create a new character for a new moment. And Erica was a part of that. And that's what I was hoping to do.
That's awesome. What elements of Werther Deladera's art made him the perfect match for this story?
Well, going back to how, I was so deep in, in the world of superheroes at the time, that it was honestly, when my editor on the project, Eric Harburn, was showing me different artists that we could approach, to bring the series to life. The thing that made me latch on to Werther was it was a page of a comic, and I wish I remembered which comic, that just had a gas station in it. And I know that sounds like like so unimportant, but I knew setting was going to be incredibly important to the series. I knew, like, for the book to work, it needed to exist in a real world that felt real. And a lot of, there are a lot of great artists out there, but setting work is one of the most difficult things, especially for, like, new and up and coming artists to do. And especially grounded setting work. Sometimes you get people who could draw a great superhero base, a great Batcave, but just drawing something mundane, they don't necessarily know how to make that interesting. But he, like, brought life into this gas station, and it was just like, okay, he's gonna get it. He's gonna understand what this book is. And then he is the one who, like, immediately he proved himself to be the absolute perfect person for the book, because he's the one who gave Erica her bandana. That was not in any of my descriptions of the character. I was more focused on the tattoo of the House of Slaughter that's on her arm. And that was the visual marker that I was like, because I wanted her to have a visual marker, but he was like, what if she has this bandana so she has to become the monster to fight the monsters? And I was like, I love it. And then I started building off of that. And that's, you know, once I saw that first design of Erica, I was like, okay, this book is something special. And you know, that like this has the potential to be something much bigger than I originally imagined.
Perfect for cosplay. We were talking about that earlier in our discussion, how it just makes it such a recognizable like and fun thing to cosplay, I'm sure. I don't know if you've seen people cosplaying it, but I'm
Oh,
sure
absolutely. It's amazing. Like every time, like there is no cooler feeling.
for sure. You've said previously in other interviews that the principal scene was one of your favorites from the first issue. Did you draw from any real world examples in writing this scene in the conversation between James and his principal?
I mean, I was always the kid who had a too close relationship with all of my teachers, where, you know, I was just always a little too upfront about how I was feeling at any given moment. And, you know, when I would just sort of talk to them, like they were, you know, like they were my friends, and some of them have become my friends. But it honestly, the part of the reason that was my favorite, one of my favorite sequences in the first book, is that I had to defend it, because when I first wrote that first issue, and I love my editor very much, and he gives incredible notes, but he questioned like what is the actual utility of that scene, because it's one of the, you know, because the first issue was so weighted toward James as a character, and Erica is pulled back. Erica, I don't think, is actually named fully until the second or third issue. Like she's not named fully until the third issue. But that was honestly part of the intent. I wanted to build this world, and I wanted to live in the grief and the horror that these kids were experiencing, because there's, you know, the like a lot of this, there's a lot of core trauma that I wanted to live in and unpack, so the horror felt real. Because that, you know, because it's, I didn't want it to be one of a book that from the beginning was only just about the moments that Erica like suits up and fights a monster. Like I didn't want that to be the thing that people are excited about issue to issue. I wanted the thing that people to be excited about are the human characters, and that was a human character moment that I think gives you more depth of who James is as a character, and you know who the entire cast is, and what the larger world is, I mean to say.
So this is just a thought I had in doing some research. I saw an article that was like 5 reasons why something is killing the children should be adapted for Netflix, and 5 reasons why it shouldn't. It was very like at the end, like on. But if Netflix were to adapt Something is Killing the Children for a show or a movie, who would you love to see as your characters?
Oh boy, it's such a hard question. I feel like I used to be so good at like doing the dream casting thing. Like when I was on message boards back in high school, I was always like, I was I was always dream casting all of the different things. But honestly, the core cast of the book is so young that I don't really know. Like I honestly don't know. Like when I saw the movie It, the kid who is in both It and Shazam, uh, who is, oh God, what's his name? I am he plays Eddie in It, and he is like he's great, and I could totally see him in the role of James in this. And but honestly, by the time the series got up and running, he might be too old for that role. Like, so that is it. And Erica, honestly, it is hard for me. Like, I've a lot of people send me tweets of like who they think would be the perfect Erica, and like Erica exists so fully in my head that it's hard for me to see her in like real people. And so much of it comes down to like the voice and the demeanor, that it's like it's hard for me to kind of imagine, but I hope to be imagining the answer to that question very soon.
That sounds like a very hopeful answer of like, maybe there's maybe. We did have
No
another
comment.
Okay, okay, that's the official statement. We're not leaking anything here. We did have a question that came up in our discussion before you joined us, about the Order of St. George and how much we all loved the inclusion of that, especially considering you had thought it was going to be these one shots. We would have never really gotten that kind of like that juicy details from the Order of St. George. But the question one of our book clubbers had was, why St. George for the order?
So the classic legend is Saint George and the Dragon, and that myth, or the like that early Christian myth, is you know it's something that I wanted to tap into, and that's why when in volume 2 of Something is Killing the Children, when you finally see the inside of the House of Slaughter, which is sort of the American branch of the Order of St. George, you get to see like you see this huge mural of St. George killing the dragon. And I wanted to build out from, like, I have lots of ideas of what I think the whole history of the Order of St. George is. And to be honest, I hope I get a chance to write some of them someday. It's like, the fun is like one of my favorite comic series of all time is Hellboy, and the fact that Hellboy was able to branch out into the BPRD and all this stuff. I do want to like open up this world as we keep moving forward, and I think there's lots of stories to tell. But yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of tap into, is like who would be the early monster hunters, and who would be the first member of an order of monster hunters back in the day.
Very cool. That's all the questions I had prepared. So we do still have a couple minutes left. I don't know if anybody has a question that they want to ask. Be aware that because it's a recording, if you unmute yourself, you will forever live on the Oakland Public Library's YouTube page with your face asking the question. But you can also put them in the chat if you have any in the chat. We did have someone say that they thought Samara Weaving would be a killer Erica. So
She'd be great.
I did have to look that up though for a second. I can't keep track of anybody's names. So I agree. Yeah, that would be cool. So I don't know if anybody has anything else they want to say, or we can kind of, yeah, John, go for it.
Turn off the microphone. I know you said a second ago, you said 15 issues for the first story or so, and you're hoping to do this for a little while. Do you have like a ending, a climax, like a here's where the story's gonna eventually get to, or is it like just keep writing until you don't want to write anymore?
That's a great question. Honestly, right now I'm looking at it in terms of story cycles. Like, we have I like the length of 15 issues for a big story cycle. And so we have ultimately the first 3 volumes of Something is Killing the Children will tell one story. Directly following that, there's going to be a brief, like, 5-issue interlude that I'm going to have more news about publicly soon. And then after that, we'll start another 15-issue story cycle. And right now in my mind, I have like 3 story cycles nailed down that would, you know, if that's all the story that there ever is of Erica Slaughter, I will be satisfied of that. But there, I think, you know, there's always the chance that it could keep on going past there. But the story that, like, the whole Archer's Peak saga tells one big story, and then each other story will take Erica to another part of the country. But there's a larger story about Erica's relationship with the House of Slaughter and her backstory that will play out over those 3 big story cycles. And so that's my hope, is if I get to tell all of that, then that is then I've done a good job.
I did get a little nervous when you said 15 at first. I was like, 15? We're almost done. But I need more.
Yeah, there was a moment that 15 was going to be the last issue, and that was designed to sort of be, you know, in an open-ended kind of way, but that was going to be the firm ending of the series. But thankfully, the book has continued to be a huge, huge success, and so we're going to keep it going.
I'm very happy to hear that, because I definitely want more. So we have time for maybe one more question if anybody else has anything. Yeah, Katie.
Oh, sorry. You're kind of talking about like possibly like it taking place at different like places in the country and stuff, and I was just wondering like why Slaughterhouse was set in, like, I noticed on like that one scene that's set in Chicago, and like what the choice was for that, because I was really excited to see that, of course, because we're so close to Chicago.
Honestly, it's the part of it. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so like I think there's always going to be like sibling relationship between Chicago and Milwaukee, especially because Milwaukee was the city that built up first, but then when they built the trains across the country, they chose Chicago instead rather than move the stop further up the lake. And then Chicago became one of the biggest cities in the country. So there's always this kind of push and pull. And but Chicago, one of the big things about Chicago is there's still a lot of there's still, especially in that downtown, the Gold Coast of Chicago, there is this there's a pre-Chicago fire area that was built during the Gilded Age, and I think that there is a part of the whole core of the House of Slaughter itself, especially in how they differ from Erica Slaughter as a character, is that they are a very stodgy, wealthy organization that is not, not all that concerned with the average person, even though the average person is who is impacted by the monsters and everything that the organization goes up against. So I wanted to lean into this very wealthy community, a very urban setting, because Erica goes into very rural areas to create that kind of balance. And honestly, I like rooting things in the Midwest because I grew up in the upper Midwest, and that is that feels very true to myself and my experiences. And even though I live in Brooklyn now, and I've been in New York for a long time, but there's a part of me that will always live in the Midwest, and that's why I keep setting all of my fictional stories in Wisconsin.
Well, we're definitely fans. We're not complaining about Midwest stories. So it is 8:00, so we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much, James, for joining us.